Welcome everyone to another Lunch and Learn in our ongoing Financial Friday series. Saney's is excited to offer these sessions in cooperation with our corporate partner, Equitable Advisors. Equitable has a long-standing presence in New York, and a large portion of Equitable's New York client base is built upon the work they do within the public education system. Through Equitable, Saney's members can receive competitive insurance rates and a full array of retirement services, including a complimentary financial profile for Saney's members, which we urge you to take advantage of because it's a great benefit. Our Equitable presenter today is Luke Yanklovsky, financial advisor and vice president with Equitable Advisors. Before we get started, please note that participants are muted during the session, but we will have some Q&A time following the presentation. If you have a question, just type it in the Q&A panel or in the chat box, and those will be answered either within the presentation or at the end. We're also recording the session, and it will be available at saneys.org within the next week. And with that, I'll turn the presentation over to Luke.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here today. As was just announced, my name is Luke. We will be covering saving for college today. Now, before we hop into it, I do just need to go over an important disclosure. So clients ask me to put this up. I just want everyone to take 5 to 10 seconds to look over this. Essentially, what it's saying is that I cannot provide any tax or legal advice. So what we will be covering today is first student loans and student loan options. We will then be going into the different options you have for saving and funding for education and the different vehicles one can use. From there, after one is out of school, the student loan forgiveness programs, and then we will finish with Q&A. So we'll do all the questions at the end. Now, there are several different types of student loans. The first is what I find most people are most familiar with, federal student loans. So a couple important things to note with federal student loans. They are not due until a couple different circumstances. First is after one graduates or leaves school if they did not graduate, or they're not a full-time student, really less than a half-time student. So until somebody graduates from school, they are not or do not have to pay their federal loans. One of the big benefits of federal student loans is they often offer lower interest rates than private loans. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about that as I go through private loans because that is not necessarily always the case, but generally speaking, that is going to be the case. Federal loans typically have between about a 5.9 and 6.8% interest rate. And federal loans are going to have significantly lower interest rates than like a credit card or a personal loan. One of the most attractive part about federal loans is there are several different repayment options somebody can take advantage of. There's 11 different repayment options, and they are tied to your monthly income. So if somebody is struggling to pay their student loans, they can go on an income-driven repayment, one of the 11 options, and figure out which payment option is going to make the most sense for them. That is certainly one of the areas I can help with, is helping decide which option is going to make the most sense for you, because it is a little bit different for everyone. With 11 options, there's no one size fits all. In order to get a federal loan, somebody does have to complete a FAFSA form or federal student aid form, and that will go through both the student and the parents' assets and incomes, and based on a formula will determine effectively how much aid they are going to get from the federal government. Now, there are actually two different types of federal loans. There are subsidized and unsubsidized loans. The main thing to keep in mind here is the difference between subsidized and unsubsidized loans is the way the interest accrues. In a subsidized loan, The interest does not accrue while you are in or your child is in school or for 6 months after. So it's a big benefit. If you have a student loan growing at 5% interest rate, that's very important to know because 5% for 4 years can certainly add up. So if we have a subsidized loan, it's not growing at that rate. Therefore, we're avoiding that 4 years of interest gain. Now, with a subsidized loan, you do have to demonstrate a financial need, and ultimately it's the college, each specific college, that determines how much you can get in subsidized loans. For an unsubsidized loans, there is no financial need requirement. And again, the amount is determined by the college, but the difference here is the interest does accrue while you're in school. So I think about myself, I had accrued about $13,000 in student loan debt from interest on my loans during school. So it's very important to make sure we try to leverage as much as possible getting subsidized loans so we can avoid an additional $13,000 in student loan debt just from being in school. The next type of student loan is a private loan. So these are loans distributed directly by private institutions. Common large private loan holders would be Wells Fargo, Discover, Citizens Bank. There are no federal forms to complete with a private loan. Somebody does have to go directly to the loan institution and take the loan out from them. Often, private loans do have higher interest rates, especially when initially taking them out, than a federal loan. The most important thing to remember with private student loans, though, is that they are not eligible for any service or public service loan forgiveness programs, and there is no different repayment programs. There's one repayment program. You have a standard payment. That is the payment you make. It doesn't really matter if somebody needs to pay less. The private loan holders say, hey, you have to pay what you have to pay. So generally speaking, we do recommend trying to get federal student loans because, as I said, a federal student loan may range from 5.9 to 6.8% as an interest rate. And private loans are often higher when somebody first takes them out. So again, I use myself as an example. I have private loans. My average loan interest rate when I was heading in school, taking those loans out, was about 10.5%. That's a high interest rate. However, in times of lower interest rates, which we experienced definitely from about 2015 to 2021, interest rates have come up a little bit, but a lot of times people were able to refinance their private student loans and get a lot lower than they were able to on a federal student loan. So for instance, I have clients that were able to get 3.1% on their private student loans, which is half of what they would have been able to get on a federal student loan. So in certain times, in certain economic environments, there are certainly times where private student loans may make more sense than federal student loans. From there, we have Parent Plus loans. The first line here is critically important. In a Parent Plus loan, it is the parent's responsibility for paying off those loans. So I ran into situations, people take out Parent Plus loans. They say, yeah, when my son or daughter graduate school, I'll just have them take over the loan. And it does not work like that. Once the parent takes out that loan, it is their obligation to pay that loan back. They cannot transfer it to the child. So if the child says, I don't want to pay that back, legally, they are not obligated to. It is 100% the responsibility of the parent to pay that loan. Generally speaking, to be eligible, you have to be a biological or adopted parent, and the student has to be, again, at least half time in school. With Parent Plus loans, they are federal loans, so they do have fixed interest rates. And right now, the fixed interest rate on a federal or Parent Plus loan is 7.54%. So one of the disadvantages of taking Parent Plus loans out versus having the child take out loans directly is you are going to have a higher interest rate on that loan. Now, the way it's calculated, how much you can borrow for a Parent Plus loan is effectively the cost of attendance minus any other financial assistance or financial aid you would be receiving. So Parent Plus loans can truly be a great option. The biggest thing to keep in mind here is, as I said in the beginning, it is a loan in your name. It is not a loan in your child's name. It cannot be transferred to your child. I've seen many people make that mistake. To talk a little bit about financial aid. So financial aid, or FAFSA, is really ultimately a form that has to be filled out with each individual college and their application requirements. So every college has a slightly different process for financial aid. So it's just important to look at the colleges that you are thinking of attending or your child's thinking of attending and figure out what their application requirements are. Somebody should fill this out in the fall of their senior year, and you have to apply each year. So often many will apply the fall of their senior year of high school, and then they don't apply again. You do have to apply each and every year because a financial situation can change. For those that are in certain income levels and needs, they also can get a Pell Grant. A Pell Grant is a form of financial aid that ultimately can offer an additional help on top of what you're getting from traditional financial aid. And it does have to be, the financial aid offer is effectively sent to you by the college. So the college reviews your application and determines the amount of financial aid that you get. So some schools may give more or less financial aid than others. Understanding the financial aid formula is important. There's a couple different big factors that go into this. There's first the parent's income and assets, and then the minor's income and assets. When I was in high school, I filled out my own FAFSA form. I had no idea how the formula worked. So I just filled it out, submitted it, didn't think anything of it. I didn't get any financial aid my first year going into college. And I learned later on, actually early on when I started this job, why that was. When I had filled out the form, I was working. I was a diligent saver. I made minimum wage, but I worked about 20 hours a week and put everything in my savings account. By my senior year, I had started working when I was about 14. By my senior year, I had saved a decent bucket of money to my savings. And I didn't realize that assets sitting in a bank account significantly impact my financial aid, whether I was planning to use it on college or not. So because I had just been a diligent student, working since my freshman year to my senior year, doing a good job saving, that tremendously impacted the amount of financial aid I ended up getting my freshman year in college. So it is important to understand how that formula works, because as I said, a small thing like that, just by having a little extra set aside, can ultimately hurt how much financial aid one does get. So transitioning over, I'm going to cover next some different vehicles that somebody can use to save for college. The first is the 529 plan. Now, this is undoubtedly the most common option somebody is going to know of when looking at college savings vehicles. If you Google college savings options, this will 100% come up the first thing every single time. The 529 plan has largely replaced the Coverdell savings plan. So the Coverdell savings plan is really the original savings plan for college, but with law and regulation changes, it's basically obsolete because of the 529 plan. The 529 plan is tailor-made for plan, so it is an educational savings account. So what that means, if somebody uses it for education expenses, they get tax-free qualified withdrawals. What are education expenses? So that's tuition, that's room and board, if they're on campus or off campus. That is a meal plan, that's books, that's laptops, really anything to do with being in school. Some things that it is not, though. If you have a minor that commutes they drive back and forth to school, I commuted for a year. If your car breaks down and you need a transmission or just typical gas or tires, you cannot use a 529 plan for that purpose. But you can use it for tuition, room and board, meal plans, books, laptops. When contributing to this account, you do get a state tax deduction if it is a New York State 529 plan. So there's ultimately only 2 New York State 529 plan providers. So that is an important thing to note. I have seen people that have 529 plans outside of New York and they're actually forfeiting a New York State tax deduction. From there, the money would then be invested and it grows and it gains interest. And the account is tax deferred as a retirement account is. So you do not pay taxes as the money in that account is gaining interest. Now there is a funding limit in this account. The funding limit is about $17,000. If you put more than $17,000 in, you can create a taxable event for yourself. Cons to this account is really one of the posts. It is tailored for college planning. So if you have a minor that ends up not going to school and they don't use it for college, which they can also use it for a trade school as well. But if they decide to go directly into the workforce, you may have done a great job saving for them, and all that money is then going to be penalized on the way out. If somebody uses it for non-education related expenses, there's a 10% IRS penalty, and then all of the investment gains within the account also are taxed as well. So it's almost a twofold penalty as it is not used for college planning. In addition, a con to a 529 plan does count against your financial aid. However, it is important to note that based on the financial aid formula, it does count against your financial aid less than a traditional bank account. Different types of assets and income have different types of weightings, and a 529 plan has a lower weighting than a bank account. A 529 plan, though, if somebody is very confident that their child is going to school, is a great option. The next option is what's called a non-qualified brokerage account, or ultimately this is a traditional investment account. This is the way somebody can invest in stocks, bonds, mutual funds, CDs outside of a retirement or education account. So some major pros to this type of account. In a traditional investment account, it is fully liquid at any time for any purpose. So you could put money in today and take it out tomorrow. Why that is beneficial is it gives you the widest range of flexibilities. If you want to save for something for your kid, but you're not sure what that thing is, maybe it's for education, but maybe it could be for a down payment on a house. Maybe it's for a car one day. This is a great option. This gives you full flexibility. In the event you needed the money in an emergency, you could use the money within this account. So there is no funding limit to this type of account. Somebody could put in $5 a year. Somebody could put in $500,000 a year. And it has the widest range of investment options. Typically speaking, a 529 plan may have a couple dozen. Retirement accounts may have a couple dozen or a couple hundred. Traditional investment accounts can have 26,000, realistically more than anyone would ever need. Cons to this type of account is the investment gains are taxable. So as those investments grow, you pay taxes each year. It is not deferred. In addition, there is no financial aid benefit for this type of account. This would count against financial aid the same as any bank account would. As I said, though, where this account is beneficial is maybe you have a young child you're saving for college and you have no idea if you want to use the money in 5 months, 5 years, 15 years for education or another big purpose. Somebody wants that flexibility. This is the account that can offer the most flexibility. Another account I just want to touch on real quick that I don't have a slide for, but is personal to me, is an UTMA or an UGMA. So it goes along with, it is very similar to an investment account, but with an UTMA or an UPMA, it is an account in which a parent contributes to the account on behalf of a minor, and at that point, they are transferring those assets to the minor. So once it goes into the account, it is their minor's assets. It has to be used for the benefit of the minor. So the pro to that is it can be used for college, that's considered benefit of the minor, but it can be used for other things like if you wanted to put a down payment on a house again, or maybe just clothing or a car, whatever it is, it just has to be for the benefit of the minor. The con to that type of account, though, is you get no tax deferral after about $1,150 in gains in the account. And as I said, you transfer the money to the minor when you make a contribution on that account. So you do lose control of that asset. So in New York, the age of majority is 18. At 18, if maybe you've saved a couple $1,000s a year into this account, at 18, that becomes that minor's assets. That can be a problem because maybe you thought it was going to be for college, and then they realize they have a good chunk of change saved into this UTMA, and they may decide to go use it for, well, they've always really wanted a brand new boat or a Corvette, and legally they can do that. There's nothing you can do to stop them. It is their asset. So that's what my parents did for me. Now, admittedly, I didn't have anywhere near enough to put a down payment on a boat or a car, but it is an option out there. It is not a favorable option for many. I find that just because you do lose control, and at the age of 18, we know many 18-year-olds maybe aren't making the best financial decisions. The next is permanent life insurance. Now, admittedly speaking, I do find when I say permanent life insurance is an education savings option, people may scratch their head a little bit. The pro to this option is it does offer a multiple goal approach. So if somebody needs to save for college, but also has a life insurance need, they can use one vehicle that potentially covers both goals. Now, permanent life insurance, how it can be used for college is it does build a cash account or equity. Similarly to how a home builds equity, permanent life insurance can build equity as well. That equity can come out of the policy tax-free, depending on how the policy is structured. So the basis always will come out, or what somebody put in always comes out tax-free, and the growth can come out tax-free as long as they're taking distributions in the right manner. You do get tax-deferred growth again, so as the investments gain interest, you do not pay taxes on it. And the beauty in the permanent life insurance is it does not count against financial aid. What I do find is this type of investment does complement other savings well. Usually, permanent life insurance is going to be used in tandem with another savings vehicle. The cons to this type of account is it is best used for young children. If somebody has a 16-year-old that's going to college in 2 years, permanent life insurance probably is not the best option because there is a cost of insurance up front. So the investments really start to gain largely after a couple years. That's why it works better with children that are generally under about 10 years old. If somebody does not take distributions the right way, investment gains can be taxable. And certainly that's where myself, my team can help just to make sure if somebody has a life insurance policy, they're leveraging it the best way for them so they're avoiding any taxes. Because I've never met anyone that wants to pay more in taxes. And then with this type of account, it does have a somewhat less flexible contribution than a 529 plan or traditional investment account. With a 529 plan or traditional investment account, at the end of the day, you could put in one lump sum when your child is 1 and never put any more money in, and that money is still going to be available for a child down the road. If somebody opens a permanent life insurance policy, pays the premiums for 1 year, and then never pays the premiums again, eventually that policy is going to lapse, so that money would not be available at that point. So again, where I think this option makes the most sense, if somebody is really looking to leverage multiple goals within one vehicle. So to transition, I'm going to talk about student loan forgiveness. Now, after college, there is student loan forgiveness programs available. The most common that is going to apply to the most people is public service loan forgiveness. With public service loan forgiveness, if you work at a non-for-profit 501c3 or public schools for 10 years as a full-time employee, That is the first qualification. 10 years does not have to be consecutive. They can be 10 years broken up, and full-time is generally considered 30 plus hours. You then have to make 120 qualifying payments towards your student loans. A qualifying payment is a payment that is on time and in the right amount. So it is not early, it is not late, it's not half of the required amount. If you pay double, it counts as one qualifying payment. You have to have a direct loan. So a direct loan is a type of federal loan. All federal loans after 2007 are direct loans. And you have to be on an income-driven repayment. This is where some people can run into problems with the program, is if they have too much income relative to their debt, they may not be eligible for an income-driven repayment, or they may be eligible, but the program is going to have their loans paid off before 10 years. So this is where I can certainly help in figuring out what's the right income-driven repayment, and are you going to qualify for the program before you even go on an income-driven repayment. If somebody meets all of these criteria, though, they can get the balance of their loans forgiven after those 10 years. Thank you all. And I believe in the chat there would be questions, but I do not see any.
Yes, it looks
so
like.
I will also go ahead.
Oh, sorry about that. I was just going to say, it looks like that we don't have any questions right at this moment. If anyone has a question, feel free to type it in, or you can go to the SANES website to contact your local Equitable representative with any other questions you might have.
And I will send a follow-up email as well if anyone has any additional questions, would like to connect with me more for a one-on-one basis. And certainly this is a QR code here for me. So this will open up directly to my calendar if anyone would like to schedule a time to connect, to go through anything education relating in more depth, or just anything in general.
It does look like one question did just pop up in the Q&A panel.
So the question is, how do you withdraw from permanent life insurance work, and do you need to repay back those withdrawals? So effectively, with permanent life insurance, there's two different types of distributions. There is a loan, and then there is a full-blown distribution. In either event, you do not necessarily need to pay it back. You can choose to pay it back. If you do a distribution, that's where it becomes taxable. If you do a loan, that's where you can avoid the potential tax penalties. Now, there are different repercussions to a loan, which I can certainly go into more in depth on a one-on-one basis.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks again, Luke, and have a great weekend, everyone. And so we'll just sign off now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for your time.